G'day, it is Amanda Cassar from Wealth Planning Partners, and I am joined by David, all the way from Citrus Financial, Hildenborough, Kent, UK. How are you, David?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Slightly different time zone to you, but it's all good.
Are you awake? I know it's bright and early for
very
you.
Very much awake, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed.
And I'll be heading off to dinner after this. So breakfast and dinner, the other ends of the day. Now, we originally met on Twitter. I believe you were touring Australia speaking for the Association of Financial Advisors in Cairns, and I was unable to attend, but followed avidly on Twitter where we met, and then I think met first in Vancouver, Canada at another conference. It rings a bell.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've connected a few times over the years then where you've been speaking or we've been attendees at a conference, and both being financial advisors around the globe have shared some ideas and thoughts, and thank you for collaborating when I got to write my fabulous book, Financial Secrets Revealed.
That was brilliant.
I think you were the first person I actually called to be a guest in my book, so thank you for that.
I was the first one that answered.
No, you were definitely the first person I asked. I love the quote that you've got on the front of yours. You control your money. It shouldn't control you. Understand it and don't be frightened of money. Do you think a lot of people are frightened of money?
Money controls everybody, whether you want it to or not. It doesn't matter how much relevance or importance you do or don't apply to it. It does kind of make the world go round. It can cause a lot of emotional stress, anxiety. It can give an awful lot of joy. So it's just very important with people when I'm talking to our clients is to make sure that they're in control of it. In other words, have a handle on it, have a budget, know what your expenses are, where you're going to head, etc. Whereas a lot of people don't. They tend to sort of stumble from one day to the next, to the month, to the year, and then look back and think, how did I get here? So it's very important, and it's not easy to do. And I think money also, it can create a lot of fear with people as well. If you haven't got enough of it or you worry about it, it does create the situation where we've probably all seen people that maybe don't open the post where it contains a credit card bill or a bank statement or whatever. People don't like opening it because it's the truth, whereas we should be facing up to it. So control the money, otherwise it will control you. It's a very good mantra.
It is indeed. Now, one of the things I wanted to learn from people when I was putting the book together was if how we grew up and our parents' beliefs around money impacted us as we grew up. And I think one of the outstanding things I learned from interviewing everybody and saying, what did your parents teach you about money? It was a big fat nothing. So having said that, there were also a lot of unspoken lessons that obviously you're picking things up over the years, even if money isn't spoken about. Now, you said your upbringing was super average, very middle class, mum and dad. I think you said dad was the worker, mum was a homemaker, which was obviously, how it was very popular back in the day when we were little people. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and your family and how all that worked?
Yeah, sure. So very just middle class, nothing particularly ordinary or special. Parents. My dad was a teacher, and actually my mum latterly, later in life, went into teaching herself as well. And we didn't live anywhere particularly posh or fancy. We had a great life. There was myself, my sister, and mum and dad. And we all just got on and had some fun, and we did all the normal stuff that families do. But when it came to sort of money, there was never a huge conversation about it. But I always had this sort of inner drive to want to do something a bit different. And there was this incident sounds very serious, like a crime, isn't it? There was this time, and I can't remember how old I was, but as when you're a child, you always want a new bicycle.
Ah, the incident of the new bicycle.
What you can't, a bike, yeah. So what
sounds
you
like
can't
a
tell
Sherlock
from the video,
Holmes mystery.
It is. Now, what you can't tell from this video is if I stood up, you'd see how tall I was. I'm 6'4". So consequently, as a young lad, I was very tall as well. So I outgrew things very, very rapidly. And one of those things was a bike. So there was one day when I wanted to go and get a new bike, and it was like, right, okay, and they're going to take me down. And there was a local sort of market we used to have just down the road here. And they had a bike stall. So they took me down there, and I'm really excited. I'm going to get a new bike. This is going to be the most exciting thing. And I had in my head, I want a racing bike. You know, the one with the drop handlebars, the 10 speed, so I can go fast. And all the friends and people that I knew used to hang around with had one of these bikes. And then I got there. And it's all right, this is the bike we're going to buy for you. And I looked around, I was like, you can't be serious. And
you would have been the daggiest kid in the 70s, I'm guessing. on this
It was a
bike?
folding bike with
God.
3 speeds, and it had a white basket on the front.
Oh, nice.
So it
had
really
a flower.
wasn't. That was anything missing from it. But it wasn't really my ideal bike. And I remember this is the first time ever I'd actually knowingly stood up in front of my mum and dad. And they said, well, it's this bike or it's nothing. And I actually said, you know what? And I remember there was a big sort of fallout at the stall where we were at. And I said, I'd rather have nothing. So I walked away without a new bike because I could not get on that and ride that around. I couldn't. Street cred, practicality, it wasn't what I wanted. I had this vision, I had this idea as to what I wanted, and it certainly was not the furthest it could have been from it.
Yep.
So from that point, what happened was, I think it was a few weeks later, they then went off to another bike, a proper bike shop, which is another little story I'll come on to in a minute, which squares a circle of this, but went there and I got a racing bike. But the deal was, if I got the racing bike, I had to pay for it. Now, I hadn't got the money at the time to pay for that, but what they did, they had a, spiral reporter's notebooks kind of thing that's sort of about this big and spiral bound. And they wrote at the top the price of this bicycle. And every time I did, whether it's a paper round or working on a Saturday or even washing the car, I would say to them, right, here's another £1, here's another £2 off. And they were literally zero off the balance that was there and reduce the balance by the amount I'd paid them back. So it was amazing at the time to actually go through all that. But what it taught me was if you want something badly enough, you can actually get it. But what happened for that was to actually show that you could work hard enough for something to get it. And I think it proved to them, actually, I'm quite determined. I stood my ground, but also I stuck to my side of the deal. There wasn't a kind of a gimme where they said, oh, actually, no, we'll just let you off that bit. We'll buy it for you anyway. It was, I had to pay literally every penny for that bike. And it was ironic that some years later, it's about 10 years ago, so I've been in business, running my own firm now since 1994. Mum and Dad actually gave me this little present. I was like, what is this? I opened it up. And it's the original receipt for the bike that they had framed. Because they think that was probably what helped spur me on. It's in your book.
We did put in the book, yes.
Yeah.
And when I visited the UK,
and it's amazing that they actually kept that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's really, really good. So what's in with the squaring of the circle is that I have a son. He's currently 10, and it was time to buy him a new bike. So I didn't make him necessarily buy it, but my grandparents bought him a bike, and we got the bike from the very same bike store that my first one came from. So He now has a bike with the same sticker from the supplier on it that I did. And It's just ironic how these things all come around, isn't it? But it does teach you a very valuable lesson at money. Not great at the time, but probably one of the best ones I've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you said there was also somebody else in your extended family who played a role in teaching you a bit about money in your teens. Can you tell us about Grandpa's role?
Oh, Grandpa was great. Grandpa was one of these sort of people that he was always funny. He used to love watching some of the Christmas programs that were on, and we used to laugh like drains at a lot of things. But he was always very entrepreneurial, should we say. And when he was retired, he still did a bit of part-time work for a local car dealership. And he used to go and pick up the cars from the sort of little old ladies when they came in for a service and that kind of stuff. And what used to happen was he was living down the south coast, and it was very, should we say, older demographic around there. So lots of them used to trade in their cars, and they had very low mileage on them because just little old ladies used to potter around in them. But some of them needed a little bit of work doing to it. And I had my first car. So I was about 18 at this point. And I used to spend every day trying to wash and clean and polish this car and do up my own car as you do when you're younger. So he had the idea. He said, well, if I get some of these cars that are coming for part exchange, I'll deliver it up to you. You can then polish it, make it look nice, sell it for a profit, and we'll split the profit. Like, okay. And he did. So we had only about 3 or 4 of these cars that we did. He'd deliver them up. I'd take it. He would know what he paid for it, and so would I. I'd spend some money doing it up and then selling it on again at a profit. I'd then meet up with my grandfather again, and he would say, okay, well, we paid, I don't know, let's say £500 for this car. What did you spend on it? I said, well, about 50. He said, right, okay, well, out of the £1,000 we sold the car for, there's your £50 back. This leaves 450. and that was half each. So we get £225 each. And it was always done. And again, it wasn't done as a, oh, don't worry about it, grandson, you can just have the money anyway. It was done as a business agreement. And we stuck to it. And that taught me an awful lot as well. But he was one of those sort of typical sort of wheeler dealers. And what he was very good at, which taught me a lot, was relationships, creating relationships with people and just being, I guess, nice person to have a conversation with. And the sort of I remember him saying, oh, the money will follow. You do the right thing, the money will follow. And it's always stuck with me. So he always did the right thing and the money did follow. And I've done exactly the same thing. But it's a lot about what we do with our clients. It's just about just sitting, listening, taking the time and creating that relationship. But it's got to be genuine. It isn't false. It's not based on, if I pretend I like you, will I sell you something? Not that at all. It should be genuine. And I love the job that I do. Luckily, I really do. I love meeting new clients. I love meeting all the old ones. The relationships that we have is fantastic. And we go through an awful lot with our clients' lives. You know, we see the best and we see the worst of their times. And we're very privileged to do that. But I think a lot of that came from my grandfather just showing me, look, you know, just be nice to people. It's not difficult. But also that sort of entrepreneurial twinkle in his eye of, well, actually, if we do enough of the right stuff, the money will follow as well. So it's really invaluable stuff. I loved it. I miss him greatly.
I bet. Actually, just this last couple of weeks in Australia, we've had the restrictions lifted and I've started seeing clients face to face again. And as much as I've loved being in hibernation in lockdown, I'd forgotten how much I love the face-to-face and the chatting. So it's been lovely to get back to that. Yeah. Now, we know most people don't go through high school and walk out going, that's it, I'm leaving school to become a financial advisor. It's still a tortured course for many of us to get there. How did you end up as a financial advisor? What was your tortured course to be the entrepreneurial business owner advisor you are now?
Well, I left school. I wasn't particularly good at the whole education thing. I didn't see the point of education, which sounds weird, because I didn't know what I wanted to be. I had a lot of my friends at school that said, I'm going to be a lawyer. I want to be a doctor or whatever. So they knew what exams they had to sit and where they're going to go. I was just going through life just thinking, I don't really know. So I wanted to leave school. I wasn't that academic. And my parents said to me, both being teachers, said, well, you're not going to leave school until you got a job. In other words, you're not going to laze around our house with us paying for it, probably. But what happened was, exactly. So I ended up getting offered actually two jobs. I was offered a management course at a bank. And at the same time, I was offered another job working within a stockbrokers locally. And I actually chose the stockbrokers purely on the basis that it was local and it paid more. And it was interesting. So I learned a lot there. About dividends. I used to write, I think it was hundreds of checks in a day. That was in the days when you actually, and my hand used to hurt at the end of the day. A check. Yes. For the younger audience, it's something you had to promise to pay somebody something on paper. But no, a lot of them are consigned to history now. But I love doing that. And I got the drift of how work worked, as it were, and employment, and got my first taste of money. We had compulsory overtime. So when the stock market was doing really, really well, compulsory overtime, earned loads of money, bought a car. But then there was a conversation that I had with somebody that was there because I was frustrated. I wanted to get on. I wanted to be the next level. And I remember saying to the boss at the time, well, look, where do I get on? He said, in 5 years' time, you could be where I am. And I remember having almost like an epiphany at that point, going, actually, I don't want to be where you are in 5 years. I don't like the life that you've got, the people that you hang around with, which is all the people that work here. It's not what I want. So I ended up going into a estate agency because I loved the people. And then from there, lost my job there because it all closed down in another recession, and almost fell into financial services because the estate agency was this situation where if you run a branch of real estate, then you actually sell the house, you do the mortgage of the house, you do the mortgage of the person that you're selling the house for. And that gave me the intro to financial services, for want of a better word. And then when that all sort of ended, I ended up falling into financial services because the guy that I used to know from that estate agency that headed up the financial services department there said, you should come and work with me. I've got so many clients. It's really sort of easy money. So I did. I went to go and work with him for a bit, only to find that things weren't quite so easy. And there was a few issues that I wasn't particularly happy with in terms of the way that things are being run and done. So I decided to go out on my own and do it my way. to give me the freedom of the sort of relationships that I wanted to have, to give me the freedom to do the business that I wanted and be me and not be shoehorned in. So as like many people that end up in all sorts of careers, I think we all end up there a little bit by default, but you sort of find your own path, you find your own way, but you find kind of what makes you happy and where you sort of feel naturally inclined to be. And that's where I feel I am. I love the relationships of the people. I just happen to be in financial services. You know, I could do anything, and I would like those relationships with those people that I deal with. So Excellent. That was how I end up in financial service. But I think most people in financial service will end up here a little bit by mistake. At that very first conference that you mentioned earlier in Cairns, I did a show of hands. There's about 750 people in the room. And the first question I asked, well, how many of you are here because this is what you've always planned to do when you leave school? How many hands went up?
None.
2.
Oh, really?
2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 hands went up. So 2 people out of the room of 750 were where they were supposed to be. The other 748 weren't. So it just goes to show.
I'd heard of the term financial advisor when I left high school. So
no, I think that we do have sometimes the wrong reputation, the wrong preconceptions from people that are looking at the outside, into the public, the third parties, because it hasn't been a profession, which it is now. It used to be, I think, called an industry before. It's more of a profession now, more than it's ever been.
And still working on that too.
Exactly, yeah. And we've still got a long way to go. But, the people like us and the people that probably watch this video are all in the right sort of place because we want to do the right thing. But I think historically, a lot of people have done the wrong thing to try and earn easy money. And the people that have suffered are the clients.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of work to do to build up that trust, which is what we should be getting as financial advisors, is
absolutely.
That whole level of trust piece. But it's our job to do it, and it's up to us to go out and do it and prove it. And I think we're slowly starting to turn the circle, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's getting brighter, and it's a good position, and it's a good business to be in. It definitely is.
So a lot of people think that entrepreneurial path is, you did this job, you did that job, you're leapfrogging all the way along until, things just keep getting better. What personal financial setbacks have you had on the way? Because being a business owner, I know it isn't all, rainbows and unicorns and good times. So how has that path gone for you?
Well, when I was speaking earlier, when I lost the job when I was in real estate agency, I had just recently bought a house, and I remember saying to the boss at the estate agency, "I'm just about to buy a house, take on a big commitment for a mortgage here. I just want to make sure we're okay." "Oh, yes, you'll be fine. You're going places with us. We only see the future's bright." 6 months later, I was made redundant, and everything closed down. So I'm trying to pay for a mortgage. But what was interesting is, and again, it comes back to relationships. One of the jobs that I had on a Saturday, when I was busy trying to pay off for my bike and my car and everything else I was doing, I worked in an electrical shop, a big chain over here. And I'd kept in touch with the boss that was there, who'd actually gone since to set up his own computer supplies business. Now, at the time, it was, I'm just trying to think, it must have been the late 80s, I guess, somewhere around there, early 90s, when computers and home computing was becoming a thing. So we wanted things like disk drives, we wanted printer cables, we wanted all the sort of consumables, and he did them. And he said to me, "I'll tell you what, I'll give them to you at sale or return, just at cost. You go and sell them." So I went off and took a load of stock from him. And I was getting up early on a Sunday morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would go off and do boot fairs. You have them in there in Australia.
Car boot sales, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, car boot sales. So I used to turn up with my car boot and set up a wallpaper pasting table and sell this stuff. And then started creating something with this. I had a mailing list. I had people that would come and find me. I'd have orders coming in, and it started getting really quite big, to the point where within about 6 months of doing it, I was earning more money doing that, working a morning a week, than I was in my previous full-time employed position.
So there's always a silver lining.
It does, but it also shows you that if you look hard enough, you can find work, and there's ways of making money, and it's a big training to go out there and do that yourself, and have to get on with that and be slightly different to what you were doing before, and not have this sort of, "Oh, well, woe is me, I had this job and I'm too good for that." No,
No,
No one's
I've
too good for
waited
anything.
tables myself and done, you
It,
just have to do what you have to do to make ends meet sometimes. So,
You do, and I don't think you're any worse off from that. I think
God,
you're very
no.
much richer for the experience, and I love it. I wouldn't change the thing. And often
And much
the
kinder
memories
to
that we
work
have in our
staff.
lives are often those ones that you punctuate with the things that you're never going to forget for good or bad. But
Yeah.
invariably, it's for good, and I think it shapes and molds you to be the person that you end up being. But that was great. So yeah, you see, redundant. I only had the
I
one
think
car.
you were
Couldn't go to interviews
newlywed.
anywhere.
You were newlywed too at the time when all this was happening. So,
Yep. And we went down to one car. I couldn't then go to the job interviews that I was trying to get because I had no car to do it. So it's, you just find ways of doing it. So in the interim, before starting at the sort of financial services side of things, I was actually working for a school photography company, selling photo. So when you go and have your children's photographs for school, then you would have this. I was selling that, but I was only selling that because I got a company car. And having a company car meant I could get to interviews. So I used it as a leapfrog to get there. But one the day I actually resigned from, I was in there about 6 months, I think, working for the photography company. I was the top salesperson because all I did was just call on the schools, just be nice, turn up, and just not try and sell. And I ended up getting loads of people that wanted to use us for the photography. And I ended up their top advisor, whatever you want to call me at the time.
sales guy.
So it is funny. But I had the company car. It's great.
Excellent. So even when you, I remember you telling a story about also once you had the business up and running and there were a lot of changes in legislation in the UK, you went through a rough patch there as well. So can you tell us a little bit about how that worked?
Yeah. So over here, when I started with the chap that set me up, he sort of portrayed the idea, which I think is possibly one of the sort of biggest lies, I guess, in financial services. Oh, it's easy money. If you sell enough of this, that you can make this. And at the time, everything was commission based as well. So at the time, so when I got there, we were selling this one product. It's called endowments that we used to do alongside a mortgage. And you could do a few mortgages a month and advise on a couple of those. And actually, you would do okay. There wasn't much choice for anything else. That was it. And then what happened was that the government legislated against those being allowed anymore. So suddenly, a lot of my income source, 90% of my income, disappeared overnight. So then you start looking at other things and you think, okay, let's turn myself to pensions now because they can still earn money there. So I did that, and then that product changed. And it just felt like I was on this never-ending cycle of whatever I tried to turn my hand to was being taken away from me, and through no fault of my own. I was advising the clients to do the right things if they had an endowment, if it was right for them. I was doing the right thing with the pension. What I wasn't doing is flogging a load of stuff to people that they didn't want, need, or wasn't any good for them. But because of a few people, the bad apples, everybody got tarred with the same brush. So the rug was being pulled out from underneath my feet without me actually realizing it. And it kind of beats you down. So it got to the point with me where I was really struggling mentally. And I think a lot of people go through this. I didn't talk to many people about it at the time because I thought, it's just something I'm going through. We all have rough patches. But what it meant for me was that I found it very, very hard to actually sometimes get out of bed in the mornings. I'd often be upset or close to tears a lot of the time in terms of what was going on. Because I just couldn't control what was going on around me. And I thought, well, this is normal. But I looked at other people thinking, Anna, you don't seem to have the same struggles that I do. So what's going on? And very, very long story short, but I eventually sort of tried different bits of help, counseling, medication, all sorts of things, only to find that none of them really worked until I actually paid. And I remember doing this. I remember saying, look, this is what I've had done. I wrote it all down on an email. This is what I've had. This is what I've been through. This is how I feel. Can you help? And I literally copied and pasted this. I found all the top experts around in my region. And I sent an email because on the websites you can do the contact me.
Yes.
And I copied and pasted this same email to about 8 different experts locally here. I say locally, within about sort of 30, 40 mile radius. Just see what happened, see what came back. And somebody came back and said, actually, we'd like to talk to you. So I went along and at great expense, spent 45 minutes with this guy who then said, well, actually, you've been treated for depression and you haven't got depression. I'm like, okay. So I've just spent 5 years of my life getting treated and counseled for depression that I haven't actually got. I said, well, what is it then? He goes, well, it's you're suffering from anxiety and panic attacks. I was like, okay, this is news. And he says, so for example, when this happens, you'll feel like that. And I went, yeah. And he said, and if you feel like this, then it makes you feel, I'm like, ah. And for the first time, I thought somebody understands me. Now I can sort this out. And because it's always very unnerving if you're feeling ill and yet you're trying to get treatment for something, but especially when it's sort of something to do with your mental health, because
Absolutely.
you can't see it.
Yeah.
If I had a broken hand, you could see it and you go, oh yeah, there's your broken hand, and I can x-ray it and I can see exactly what you need to do. But with mental health, it's a lot more complicated. So what happened with me, I went for a bit of counselling, but it wasn't working quick enough for me because I'm a bit impatient when it comes to things like that.
So hard to believe.
Well, there you go. So what I did was then I actually wrote another email because I thought, well, the first one worked quite well. And I wrote another email just saying, right, this is my history. This is what I've been diagnosed with, and this is what it's all about. Can you help? And I sent it to about 10 hypnotherapists. So I've been watching a program. I like Darren Brown and people like that. I just find them fascinating. And I think the human mind is an amazing thing.
Agreed.
So I sent it to about 10 hypnotherapists around the area with the same story, and just almost to sort of throw it out there and see who comes back. And most of them all came back saying we're willing to help. One chap wanted to come out of retirement to help me. But there was one that particularly fascinated me. And she was a lady locally who I'm still in touch with today. And she said, I really want to help you, but can we have a phone call? I just think it'd be good. And I was like, okay. So I rung her up. And it turned out that her background was that she was a journalist. And as part of one of the newspaper stories that she was writing, she was researching hypnotherapists to prove what a shower that they were. And it was the whole thing was in your head. You couldn't get hypnotized. It's all just a stage show. It's all just crazy. And so she went off to go and research this. And in doing her research, went to see a hypnotherapist as part of it. And this hypnotherapist changed her life. So she decided she would do the same and stopped being a journalist and trained as a hypnotherapist.
Oh, wow. Talk about conversion.
So that lady saw me, and I have to say it is brilliant. For me, it worked really, really well for me. It works, different things work for different people. But it was probably the laziest therapy you can ever have. You lie back on a couch, you sort of fall asleep for a bit, or you think you do, and then you wake up and you think, well, what just happened there? And I remember saying to her once, well, I said, I think I was asleep. Because when you go to sleep, your legs sort of flinch and things like that.
Yes.
And she said, oh, yeah. They said, you might have been. She said, but then why did you wake up when I said 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, open your eyes? You did. I was like, okay, point taken. And anyway, so after a few sessions of that, it was brilliant. It doesn't go away. I still get the thoughts and the feelings, but what it is, it's more that I'm a bit like going back to you controlling the money. I'm controlling the mind, not the mind controlling me.
Yep.
So I'm far more aware of it. I know the sort of what to watch for. I'm not completely insensitive to everything. But what it has done is given me a different view of other people, and maybe an appreciation for what other people might be going through, and invariably privately. So I can sort of spot signs now, especially with the clients or friends or family that I'm talking to. I'm pretty perceptive at being able to spot things and check in on people to make sure they're okay, and have sort of other conversations. And I've had some amazing conversations. One of them with a friend of mine most recently. I go skiing every year down in France that involves a 12-hour drive. And I was talking to somebody about all of this in the car. And it's amazing how many people that he knew, for example, that had gone through it. But also clients and things. I've had people open up to me and just go, actually, to have someone understand this about how I feel. First of all, I know I'm not abnormal. Second thing, somebody else gets it, and it isn't just me. And it's okay to not be okay. And I think that there's a big thing that people should be talking an awful lot more. And here we are, we're recording this now in the sort of in the middle of the pandemic, where I think there's going to be a fallout of mental health from this. I've already started seeing it, and you can just read it, even in some people's Facebook posts. You just see a change of mood and a change of feeling.
Well, I mean, also this week, we're seeing the riots in America. People, have been locked up for 6 or 8 weeks. The riots over the wrongful death of George Floyd and other, African Americans. So the massive outpouring, over and above, I think the grief, the anger that is going on is also part of that fallout. And I know I've been privileged to be with you at conferences after you shared your story to, I think, 14,000 people one time in Vancouver. I was there a year later when a gentleman approached you and was so grateful that you'd shared that story and what a difference it had made in his life. And I know I got a little bit teary and choked up to, hear the gratitude in his voice that, it made such a difference for him that someone was okay to be vulnerable and to say, people see the outside. I know you've got a presentation that you do on the BBC. You're seen in the media and everyone thinks, isn't life rosy? But that's not always the case. And to be able to be vulnerable enough to share that, I think is a very big gift. And, I thank you for the people I know you've helped by sharing that.
Well, thank you. And hopefully it has helped other people to be more open with it. I know that I've heard from other people where I've met up with people afterwards that have been in tears and so on. And I don't want to see anyone upset, but I just think it maybe gives permission for people to be more open. And if actually, because it is right, because I think a lot of what anybody does with their work, professional, no matter if it's financial services or not, there's always this thing of, you first meet people. So how are you? How's work? Oh, it's busy. And this default answer is that we're always programmed almost to look at me. I'm very successful. I'm so successful, and everything's wonderful around me, because we don't want to say, well, actually, you know what? I'm having a really hard time. Because people don't know how to react to that. But we should be reacting more. We should be able to be more honest with people, and we should have those conversations with people. And that's all I'm trying to do, is to go out there and say, for goodness sake, talk. Be yourself. And just, you'll be surprised how many other people out there can resonate with that, more so than you saying and being somebody that you're not, or certainly not how you're feeling. But it's just important that people should talk, definitely.
Absolutely. So back to the financial part, which I know you've shared that at financial services conferences. I suppose one of the things people come to advisors for is, I need advice. So what's the best financial advice you've personally been given by somebody, anybody?
Crikey. I mean, there's all sorts of, I think a lot of it is about taking risks if they're calculated. I think sometimes we're too frightened to do things. I'm very mindful. Here I am. I'm early 50s, and my life is whizzing along. So what I don't want to do is to end up, and we counsel clients with this as well. Let's say, later on down the line, and you're sort of on your deathbed, and you think, I wish I, or should have, or could have. Now, I'm not advocating for one moment that anybody goes off and spends money they haven't got, because that's wrong. But to actually sit down and think about what their life's about and what they want to get out of it, and how much they need to do that. Do they want to go on the big holiday with their families and parents before it's too late, but I kind of mean it, before it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is it you want to do? What is it you want to experience in life? I think for me, financial planning is all about that, not about the product. So people will come to me saying, I need to sort out my pension. It's like, you don't want a pension. No one wants a blooming pension. You want what it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? So if we can get to that, no one wants life insurance. They want what it does.
Yeah.
It's all about getting to the bottom of it and say, well, what is it you want and you actually need? But yeah, I would say have the odd bit of risk to make it calculated. Have a can-do attitude. And if you work hard enough and you're doing something that you're absolutely passionate about, then you're going to have some fun along the way, and you will make some money. And people won't mind if you do. I think you've got to be that sort of person where, I remember turning up to go and see a client once, and I'm lucky I've got a cousin that works for quite a well-known sort of car dealership brand. And I've turned up because I do it because it's just easy. I haven't got to think about it. He says, just take this car, sign here, and I'm done. And I get it all at staff and family rates, which is great. So I remember turning up to see a client once, and it was almost, someone got a good car. You're obviously doing quite well. And I felt straight away like I should apologize for that and go, it's okay, but blah, blah, blah. Oh, no, and I don't know where it came, but turned it around its head straight away. And I said, the last thing you should be doing is dealing with an unsuccessful financial advisor.
Beautiful.
And absolutely since then, now what happens when I go and see him, he's like, oh, what car have you got? He always wants to make sure I've got a better car than him because he knows that I'm aspirational. And if I turned up in some old wreck, he would probably be more worried.
Yeah, absolutely, as he should be.
It's about finding that middle ground. Now, I wouldn't turn up in a yellow Ferrari. That's definitely not my style. But something that's smart.
At 6'4", David, you'd be unlikely to fit in a yellow Ferrari.
That's true. 6'4", I definitely wouldn't.
So that's the best advice you've been given, to take that calculated risk. What's your top tip that you like to give to your clients?
Be aware of what you're spending every month. Actually write things down. Very few people that I see actually have a budget planner or a spreadsheet of some sort. Money tends to just disappear. And I had a great expression that a client told me about the other day. He says, well, it's just life gunk. I never heard of life gunk. Life gunk. And he said, well, I said, what's that? He goes, well, you take some money out. He said you might take out £10, $10 or whatever to go and buy a paper or a coffee. And you've got the rest of the change, it's probably 70% of it. Where does it go? It just disappears. Stuff just happens. And it could be that you buy a beer with it. It could be that you lose it. He said, but just stuff costs you a lot more. He said, and actually, if you actually allocate, I mean, there was somebody who I was sorting out that had horrendous sort of financial problems. And she collected teapots. Okay. And she had this fireplace. And I put a teapot, about 6 teapots up in the fireplace. I went, right, put a post now. That teapot is your electricity and your gas. So when you get paid, you take out cash, you put that one in that teapot, this bit for your food in that teapot, this teapot for your petrol, and we label them all up. I said, and then you know what you've got to spend on each one. And so I've never been aware of that before. I used to just spend it as I wanted to and hope it would be okay. So I would say to people, write a budget and be aware of what you're spending every month and keep an eye on what goes out your bank account, because you'd be quite surprised as to what you can spend on life gunk
stuff,
or the takeaways or going out a lot. And if you're more aware of it, you know where you can cut down, because often people don't look at it and review it.
I remember when my son got his first job as an apprentice and he wasn't saving anything, and I actually still had access to his bank account at that stage. And I looked up what he was spending on coffee and lunches, and he was spending $250 a week. But again, it was his first job. A week. He'd never, I mean, his wage wasn't much bigger than that, but he had no clue, because all of a sudden he had earned money and he could spend money, but had no idea what to do with it, how to track it. So I think that gave him a massive slap in the face when I went, right, sweetheart, this is where it's going. You're eating it and you're drinking it. Like there's nothing left. So yeah, that was
very hard.
Now you've got a son as well. Your Harvey's a little bit younger than my Mitch. So he's around 10, I think you said. Are there particular lessons that you want to leave Harvey with in light of the fact that most parents don't talk to their kids about money at all? Are you much more conscious about it? And what do you want to share with him?
I'm much more conscious of it, and I try and educate him with money as well. So he's always had this idea that if something breaks, it doesn't automatically get replaced. So he has to look after things. He has to value things and appreciate that things, when you've bought something, and it could be from the bike, it could be an iPad, it could be whatever, that somebody somewhere has had to trade their time, effort, and energy for money to provide that for you. And he knows that. So his iPad, it's never broken. He's never broken anything, because he knows that if it gets broken, if it's not as an accident, if he's just been mistreating it or something, it doesn't just appear. These things there's a value to these things. So delayed gratification as well. So he recently bought, I think it's called a hoverboard, whatever it is, where you go like a Segway thing you stand on. Yep. He saved up for that.
So how did he save? Did he have to do chores around the house to get money, or birthday money?
No, he was given. He didn't do chores around the house. He was given sort of money over birthday and Christmas over the last year or two, and he's just saved it.
Yep.
And there was a time when we were on holiday, and when you were younger, if you got given, we were given like 10, 20 pounds, I think, by one of the grandparents, and where we go down in Devon, there's a toy shop, proper old traditional toy shop, which to him was like. So he goes in this toy shop and he's got his money, and it's like he's burning a hole in his pocket. It's like, I've got to spend it. It's like, look, you haven't got to spend it today. And it was just me and him in there. And he's like, what about this car? And I buy this car. I buy. Just slow down. Look, think about it. you've got so many of those things already. You don't have to spend anything today. You could actually have what's called delayed gratification, but you could just buy something that might last a bit longer. And he said, well, like what? And actually what we found was one of these things that you could throw on the beach. It's like a rugby ball shaped thing with a fin on the end that you throw and it whistles.
Yep.
Yeah. And he bought that. The amount of fun that we've had with that, and it must be 4 or 5 years old now. He still gets it out. He said, Daddy, I remember when we bought this in the toy shop about you talking to me about money. Yeah. He's never forgotten it.
There's a lesson.
Now, this thing cost about £20, but it's that kind of thing. Now, I'm not trying to stop him from having fun, far from it. But what I'm trying to do is just think a bit about what you're spending your money on, and be careful with your budgeting, and make sure that whatever you buy might last, and that you can also share with other people. You know, don't just buy another car because you've got 30 of them and you want 31. That's not going to make much of a difference to your life, but just have a think about it a little bit more. Well, and also the idea that you do need to work to exchange for money.
Yeah, what you've technically told him to invest in isn't the actual toy, it's the experiences that you're going to have with that, isn't it? Yeah. So and that lasts.
And also something that lasts is the other thing as well, because you have a car or whatever it might have been that you'd bought, it would have disappeared into I don't know,
the sandbox,
a box of toys somewhere that would have disappeared. You probably wouldn't. But this thing, it comes out every year, and we use it a lot, and it's funny. He always remembers that story. Yep. But yeah, if he wants to work, you know, he often asks me really deep questions about stuff. Often when we're driving in the car, he'll just ask something, and it's amazing what they take in. They do so. I mean, the whole cliche, they're like sponges. They are. But it's fascinating talking to him and some of the conversations and what his worldview is. And obviously, he's growing up. He's going to be 11 soon, and it's amazing how he's changing in terms of what his worldview is and his outlook and his attitude, which is brilliant to watch.
I remember you told me, I think he was about 8 one time, and he was looking out where you live, and I remember he expressed a beautiful comment of gratitude about, we're really lucky, aren't we? So he is a bit of a deep thinker, isn't he, young Harvey? So.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. It was when he was sat on I think he was sat on the trampoline, because we're lucky enough that we got a field next door to where you've been here. You've seen it. It was like a field next door. And he just sat on the trampoline. I was sat there with him. And he said, we're really lucky, aren't we? And it was like, yeah, we are. But, you know, it isn't luck. You know, it's hard work. It's effort and it's thought that gets you to these things. But he sees some of his other school friends have got bigger gardens than what we've got, but some of them have got smaller ones. And he's very aware, but I've always been very keen to show him that there are two sides to life. We took him up to a presentation from one evening up in London to go and see somebody's off the television. I've forgotten his name now. It's a television sort of wildlife presenter, really well known. He does Deadly 60, whether you got him there. Who was that?
No, we've just never replaced Steve Irwin. We've just gone into morning.
No, he's just like Steve Irwin, but the British version.
Well, except his children.
He's better. But anyway, but he was doing a presentation up in London, and he had this great thing. It was the best science lesson you could ever have. It was the best teacher ever. He's telling us all about sharks not being dangerous, and you know why people were fearful of them. Anyway, so we're walking back, and we're really early for the train, and there was this homeless guy just on the side of the road as they are. And I thought, I don't think Harvey's ever seen somebody that's homeless before, because he probably hasn't. So I just gave him some money, and I said, just go up and just give this to him. He's like, okay. And he said, why is that? I said, well, not everyone's got what we've got. And he goes up and he goes up and he's very polite. He says, here you are, this is for you. And the person that's homeless has said, oh, thank you ever so much. Have a really good evening, like that. And we wandered on our way, and it just had a big, profound effect on him and me, because I just said, well, look, you know, we're lucky. We're going home now on a train to go home to a warm house, and he hasn't got that. And you've probably made a real difference to his life. That means he can go and buy a sandwich. And like I said, it's simple things, but to him, that is huge. So we have to make sure that we look after other people around us.
Absolutely.
It isn't all about our world. You know, we need to make sure that we do the right thing. And he's never forgotten that. And he's very aware since that. And it's funny that when you do these little things with people who are little people, what sticks up in here and what they remember.
Absolutely.
That's the sort of one of the best lessons you can ever have, is just showing them the real world and explaining your view of it, so they appreciate that it's not all there for them.
Yep.
You know, it's just to appreciate others, and he certainly does appreciate others. He's very thoughtful. He thinks a lot and says a lot, so I know he gets it.
Yeah, I'm glad that we've got a generation here that's actually teaching the next generation. So that's very, very cool that we're playing it forward, I suppose, for want of a better word. Now,
Mm.
David, do you personally have a favourite form of investment?
Yes. Yourself. Honestly, I was never very good, as I said, with school at the point, because I didn't see the point of it. I didn't know where I was heading. Now I'm kind of in this groove, and I found my niche, or niche, as I think some people say. It's about educating yourself and learning and being the best that you can be in a particular topic, especially something that you're passionate about, because it doesn't feel like learning. So I'm a huge advocate of coaching. I'm a huge advocate of reading books. I'm a huge advocate of going to conferences and learning from other people to become a sort of molded version better of yourself than you were before you went. So the best thing I can say to people is get your head in a book. There's books on everything. There's no excuse why you can't learn about anything anymore. Somebody out there knows. It's never been more accessible, what with social media and the internet, than what it has been. It's easy now to get out there and learn stuff and try and educate yourself better. And I would think that's the best advice I can give anybody. And even down to when I was doing the public speaking thing, the first thing I did, put myself on a public speaking course from somebody that knows how to do it. Yep. You know, so I've been trained. I know now what to do. So it's not difficult, but it isn't easy either, because it means that you've got to make a bit of effort. But if it's worth it, and boy, is it worth it. So I would say invest in yourself and educate yourself.
I love that, all the advisors in it that I interview, a financial product has never been once mentioned. So I really love that. No. Now, to take us out, you just said books were a highlight for you. Do you have one single book that you would recommend to people, whether it's financial-based, business-based, personal development-based? What would be your top tip to read?
Oh, I've read so many books. There's a whole bookshelf full of them all over there.
I thought they were cookbooks.
Sorry?
I thought they were cookbooks.
Well, I'm reading this one at the moment, which I'm really finding very, very fascinating. And it's this. Will it make the boat go faster? Now, it's something, it is particularly poignant with you guys at the moment as well. It's a guy who's an Olympic rower, about how he got gold in the Sydney Olympics.
And he wasn't an Aussie, was he?
No, he's a British rower. But what's interesting is that the rower, Ben Hunt Davis, he talks about each chapter is broken down into his journey, about what he had to sacrifice and what he had to give up. Things like missing family weddings, having to go out a training run on Christmas Day, all these things that he did, the price that he paid to get the gold medal, and what the headset and the mindset was like to go through that. But then as he outlines each chapter, then this other lady, Harriet Beveridge, who's sort of a psychotherapist, something, then analyzes what he said and why it meant so much and how it means and how we can adapt it to ourselves. So it's a really powerful book, and it's a nice, easy read. I like an easy read.
Okay.
I like something I can just pick up and just go through. But there's countless books. But just pick up a book, read it. Even if you're not really good at reading, there's loads of apps, I think, where you can read a book in 15 minutes.
Yep.
If you really like
Blinkist
that.
Or Audible, and so many options now.
Loads of stuff.
Highlight reels.
Yeah, and Audible's brilliant, because if you're in your car for any period of time, my commute every day is about 10 minutes, 15 minutes to the office when the office is open. So each day, that's 20 to 30 minutes that I listen to a book. You add that up over 5 days, you've got two and a half hours of book reading in a day, in just doing your normal daily routine. So there's no excuse for people. You can pick up a book even if you're listening to it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your tips with us, David Braithwaite from Hildenborough. We appreciate that. And
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. It's been brilliant. It's like I could chat for ages, as you can probably gather.
Indeed. Well, thank you again, and I'm sure we'll catch up another time.
Yeah, thank you very much.